Okay, let us begin. Thank you for joining us. If you're expecting to be on the webinar TRTP Outcomes, the Client Journey with myself, Judith Richards, Kim Hopson, Psychologist, and Richard Faye, Psychotherapist, Counsellor, you are in the right place. For those who don't know me, I'm Judith Richards. I'm the creator of TRTP, the Richards Trauma Process. And today I am blessed and delighted to be joined by Kim Hopson, registered psychologist in Sydney, and Richard Faye, psychotherapist counsellor in Brisbane, Australia. Kim, tell us about you. Introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, everybody. As Jude said, I'm Kim Hopson. I'm a psychologist. I'm based in Sydney, and I've been working as a psychologist in private practice for over 30 years now. I first got introduced to TRTP at the beginning of 2016. And the reason I came to TRTP was because I'd been working for a long time with clients with trauma. And I was finding that the different approaches I was using really weren't working. They weren't effective. So I decided I had to try TRTP, and I haven't looked back. It is my modality of choice. I've gone from probably where I'd have a few clients doing TRTP, where now it's probably about 95% of my practice.
Okay, and what sort of clients are you dealing with, Kim?
I tend to deal with probably very serious cases and more probably pointy end cases, people who've been severely traumatized, either over a lifetime from childhood, or perhaps some very extremely traumatic events later in their lives.
Well, we work together generally once a week with these.
Yes.
Having conversations and supervision around these extreme horror movie experiences that your clients have. And so your work with TRTP is,
tend to go slowly.
It tends to go slowly because these people are really in a bad way, often in hospital, often hospitalised, etc. And Richard, just saying to people, TRTP is a 3-step process, and it can be just 3 sessions, bang, bang, bang. With the most extreme pointy end, you have practitioners like Kim working with people who've been in hospital for a long time, who are horrifically horror movie traumatized. And Richard, tell us about your clientele, because you get some pretty extreme cases as well.
Oh, I do. I get clients who walk in my door suicidal and walk out of my door less than a month later well. And but I tend to rarely go beyond the 3 sessions of TRTP, because I find for the clients that I see, and very few of them are hospitalized when they see me, they get well in those 3 sessions. Every now and then I might do a 4th, but that would be uncommon. It would be maybe 1 in 20, where I would need to do a 1 in 30 that I would need to do a 4th session. Right. And it would usually be a very short one.
Yeah, just a mop up, really.
A mop up, yep.
So we're going to talk about, and what we advertised is about what's the process. There's what does each step aim to do, and what do clients experience as they progress through the process. And Kim, you were talking just before about the first step, which is choice. And choice is a really big point, a really big part of the beginning of session 1. Hey, Richard, that being able to realize, oh, actually, I get to choose here.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that, Kim? And I can share the tea if you like, when you say.
Before we actually go into the session, there are a few steps we take which are really important to prepare the person for the process ahead. And part of it is helping the client understand that they actually have a responsibility as part of the healing journey. And more importantly, that they actually have choices. And for many people, they don't know that. They've never experienced having a choice. the families they've grown up in, there weren't choices. They were in less than ideal situations, often a lot of abuse at home. So there was no choice in their lives. So by doing this particular process, they can actually see, well, in fact, I do have a choice. And for many people at that point in time, that's an eye-opener. They can sort of start to breathe a sigh of relief and say, I actually have a choice. And I remember one person saying, I don't have to be passive anymore. I can actually do something.
Yeah.
And that was quite an illuminating experience for him.
Yeah, I get to choose.
The key challenge is the trauma gets stuck in our unconscious, and so our
Yes.
body keeps playing it as if it's still happening. So here we go again. I always get this happening to me. Why does everything bad happen to me? Why doesn't anyone? Why am I such a shit magnet? And so on. Well, if the unconscious is doing that, the body is doing it, then the thoughts and feelings are doing it. Where's their choice? Their choice is lost probably somewhere decades ago. They don't even know they could actually choose anything different. And clients so often say to me, you mean it's that simple? I do get to choose? I look at them and I go, in this room you do. And once you do here, you will be able to everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because choice leads to agency, agency leads to empowerment, and empowerment leads to thriving.
Thank you, Richard. So let's look at the first step of TRTP. Once we've assessed the client, that they are a candidate for TRTP, because not everybody is. The great philosopher Seneca said it's part of the cure to wish to be cured. So we investigate that first. But once we've assessed that this client is a candidate for TRTP, we go to the T. And we say, you're here, to the client. You actually get to choose today, right now. All change begins with a strong, conscious decision. So you get to choose today. You're at the crossroads, not well or well, stuck, powerless, or empowered, thriving. Kim or Richard, would either of you like to say anything about this?
Go for it, Kim.
Well, at this point, even drawing the T, again, as Richard was saying too, and I've been saying, it's like, okay, I get to a cross point in my life. And I say that even the moment we wake up in the morning, we're making decisions. We're making thousands of decisions every day. And you've got a decision as to whether you're going to get out of bed or you're going to stay in bed. Are you going to eat well? Are you going to go and smoke some weed? Are you going to drink that bottle of alcohol? Every moment is an opportunity for you to make a decision. And this process will actually help your decision-making go a lot easier. But to start off with, let's have a look and see what are some of the decisions you're making that leave you stuck, that leave you powerless? What are some of the decisions that perhaps you could make that will leave you feeling a lot more empowered in your life, where you can get a sense of, oh, I can start to breathe. Okay, I can do it. I can start to think I can move forward in my life. And doing this T, and I say to my clients, I'm going to refer to this regularly. And what I also notice is, and many of my clients have said, Kim, I can see you doing this, because I say, all right, the T, what's your choice? What are you going to do? And they'll see that in their mind's eye. They'll wake up in the morning, they'll be feeling not good, and they'll be making that choice themselves. So right from the beginning, they're already moving into this more powerful, empowered place.
Yeah. And the first decision, not well or well, stuck or empowered.
I once said to a client, they said, but I don't get to choose. You have no idea how everybody in my life controls me. And I said, do you have a cold shower each morning? And they said, oh, no, not in winter. Heavens, no way. I said, so you choose to turn some hot water on. You choose to treat your body with care and respect as you shower, so that you don't have to, not to saying that a cold shower is not a bad idea if you want to have that, but she gets to choose. She got to choose what temperature the water was going to be. I said, there you are. You choose there. What if you could choose like that everywhere in your life?
Wow, that would have blown a mind. Yeah. And so then the next question, when someone, obviously they come over here, well, I want to be well, I want to be empowered, I want to be thriving. Okay, whose responsibility is it to get you there? Because so often when we're working in the mental health space, we tend, because we are kind, generous people, we tend to take on the responsibility. We want our clients to be well more than they do. And we tend to take on the responsibility for that. So that question, no matter what process you're using, no matter what methodology you're using, does that, okay, who's responsible for you getting here? And I've had emails from psychologists, et cetera, saying, just doing that, I go home less exhausted because I'm not carrying it. So who's responsible? Well, I am. And then to uncover some of the secondary benefits, what's going to be the worst thing about being well, empowered, thriving. And that can take some detective work and some time to bring up, well, what could be the worst thing about that, so that we deal with that before we go further.
And that's what's so wonderful about this process that Judith's created, because everything, it's a very elegant approach where everything is brought together and there's an important reason behind each of these steps, where you're getting each person to make a decision. Are you prepared to put in the work or not? Let's uncover, and as therapists, we work to find out what are the secondary gains. Are there any secondary gains here? And we explore those, so to help that person understand where there may be some sabotaging behaviours. And so we go very, very carefully in a very step-by-step process to ensure that the person is ready before we actually begin, which I think is just such a wonderful place to start. And in training, we learn how to do this so easily, so quickly. And for the client, it feels quite an easy flow.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim.
I say to clients, imagine that you're standing behind an invisible door, and inside the room that you're in, there's all the pain that you've known, all the trauma, all of the shutdown, all of the shit that you've gone through. And where I stand is a place of safety, empowerment, peace, thriving. But there's no handle on my side of the door. There's only a handle on your side. I can't open that door. You can. By choosing, just by choosing, you open the door and you step into my space, and the rest will happen. See, it's the first and most important step of TRTP's effectiveness and power, is getting the client to take responsibility and choosing. Take responsibility to be well and to choose it. They don't need to do much else at all. That's the beauty of TRTP. The rest just happens. We don't have to do, as therapists, an awful lot either. It's not exhausting therapy, because if you stay in this place of empowerment and the client is choosing it, you go on a ride together and it happens. Because we use the language of the unconscious from that point onwards, which does all of the heavy lifting. The unconscious is so powerful when it's able to engage in the therapy. If it's not engaged, as CBT has told all of us, CBT might be somewhat helpful for a period of time, but you're asking what's really 5% of who we are to do 95% of the work, and it can't. And so it struggles. Why Kim said she stopped. My story is, as I've shared with many, is that I was in a group supervision with 6 other therapists, a supervisor and 5 other therapists. And one of the other therapists had trained in TRTP and it was getting amazing outcomes, and it pissed me off. And I'm not afraid to say it. I had professional envy because I had lectured this man. I was older than him, more experienced than him. And suddenly he was getting better outcomes than me. And I went to my supervisor, and my supervisor said, well, check it out if you're that upset. I was basically having a I'll have what she's having moment from Harry Met Sally. And the rest is history, because not just did I train in it, but in that group supervision of 6 therapists and a supervisor, all of us are now TRTP therapists, all of us. Because once I trained in it, and then there was David and myself, then Rob had to find out, and then Judy, and then Felipe, and so it goes on, and Janet, and it just kept on going. And so now, wonderfully, our group supervision is now a TRTP group supervision.
That's great. That's great. And you were talking just before, Richard, about the importance of the unconscious. I'm just going to share a little PowerPoint here, and it won't be death by PowerPoint. And many people aren't aware of this, but it has been proven, and it's been published.
Well, Jung was the first to conclude, and now, of course, we know it's true from neuroscience.
Yeah, the conscious mind only works 5% of the time. And we think that's in control. But it's not. It's the unconscious that runs every pattern of thought, feeling, behavior, that runs the situations we get ourselves into, runs the whole thing, runs every electrical event in the body, every chemical reaction. And that's the big guy. And so the conscious choice to begin with, yes, happens here. But from there and getting the client consciously on board, then we step into this realm of the unconscious. And this unconscious, from even before we're born, up until the age of 7, even to 8, in some circumstances, is a sponge. We know that. There's been so much research on this. And so we take on ideas even before we're born of, are we loved? Are we safe? And then we're born. For some people, that's a life-threatening event. That's a trauma in itself. And then we're born into whatever situation we're born into. And for those first 7 to 8 years, we're taking on ideas that become our foundation, our unconscious core beliefs that run the rest of our lives. Things like, and where do we take these ideas from? We take them from adults in authority, like the grade 1 teacher who says, you're stupid, you'll never get a job, you'll never amount to anything. We take it from a little person's perception of what's going on. So we're 4 years old and mum has left. Well, mum, we're egocentric. Everything's about us. So mum must have left because she can't love me because I'm not lovable. I'm not a good girl. I'm a terrible person. I deserve to be abandoned. Of course, no one will love me. And then we're 50 and we're still running on the same programming, that software that gets installed when we're very young. So in session 1, we look at what was the software that was installed, one of these unconscious core beliefs that went in as a tiny child that are running our life, because the unconscious manifests what we believe. The unconscious manifests what it believes to be true. So, for example, myself, and some people know my story of extreme ridiculousness and trauma, which is how I came up with TRTP. And so my programming from when I was very little was, I don't matter, and I'm going to curse people. I'm shit and I deserve to be treated like shit. I deserve to suffer. I deserve to be punished. And that was the whole movie of my life until I figured it out. So abuse, 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 abuse. And it didn't stop till I figured out how to change the programming, which is in that first half hour of TRTP, we go in, we find out what are the negative programs that are running this person's life, and we change those. We get the unconscious and the conscious mind in sync. Because if you have a client going, yes, I'm ready to get rid of this anxiety, I'm ready to just stop being in this shut down, terrible place, that's great. But if that's just the 5% of the conscious mind working, and the 95% goes, are you crazy? If you get rid of the anxiety, you'll be out in the world. The world's not safe. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to keep you locked down with panic attacks. You're not going out into the world because I'll keep you safe. We have to get the unconscious and conscious in sync. The conscious mind might say, yes, it's time to get well. It's safe to be well now. And the unconscious, if it goes, nah, you're not getting well. Well, there's nothing we can do. It doesn't matter what method we use. We have to get the unconscious and conscious in sync, and that's what we do in session 1. What are some of the outcomes you've seen after going through all of that in session 1? Kim, you might do it more slowly. Richard, you just do it. What are some of the outcomes? What are some of the experiences that your clients have gone through just with session 1?
Well, some very telling ones. At the end, they come out, well, certainly that a weight is starting to lift, and there's a sense of feeling cleansed. There's a sense of all the crap that they've been carrying is disappearing, and they can feel it actually leaving their bodies. And that can be such a profound experience, particularly for people who experience extreme self-loathing, that by the time they've finished even session 1, and it certainly continues after the second phase, that there's this sense of letting go of all of that toxicity, all of the crap that they've been carrying around, all of those beliefs that they've been carrying, which has led to their self-loathing and loathing that little part of themselves. And I remember recently, or at some stage, one person told me that she was actually able to connect with her younger self, whom she could not engage at all because of what had happened to her as a child. But even after the first step, that first session, she was able to start to imagine that that part of her could become her. So there was this incredible cleansing, incredible relief. And for some people, they actually want to stay there. So we go through these different scenes in that first session. And I've had some people say, no, stop. I just want to stay here. I just want to stay. I want to enjoy this. I really want to enjoy being here. This feels so good. Oh, I can feel it leaving my body now. I can feel it.
Yeah.
And we just sit there with it for as long as they like, as they can feel all of this awfulness leaving their bodies.
Yes.
I'm
Wonderful.
currently involved in a research project with the University of Melbourne with TRTP, and I'm about halfway through, maybe 7 or 8 clients of 20 consecutive clients going through TRTP, and I'm measuring them now with DAS scores at the beginning of sessions 1, 2, 3, and a month later to make sure, see how the process is going. And to my surprise, some of the clients, this is my surprise because usually it takes 2 sessions, not 3, 2 to get clients well. Usually 2, that's all. The third is the icing on the cake, and that's all about the future. We'll come to that in a moment. But up to my great surprise, several of my clients have had profound outcomes just after 1 session. Everything's great. I was surprised. Not all. Some it takes the second, because what happens is something shifts after the first session. They know who they are, but they don't know why they've suffered so much pain and they've had all these people causing so much trauma in their life. And I want to deal with them. How do I deal with that?
And that's,
now I know who I am. How do I shift? How do I change my past? That's where we go to session 2. And so sometimes they come to me after 1 session, at the beginning of the second session, and they go, well, yeah, that's all great, but, and I go, don't worry, we're going to deal with that now.
this is where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people ask, well, how do you do this? Well, trauma is stored in the unconscious. And so we deal with it where it is stored. It's not stored in the conscious mind. If it was, we'd be able to say, well, that was 2009. It's now 2023. It's over. And I'm safe. I got through it. But no, it dwells in the unconscious, and it's running like a videotape loop, that event and that event and that event and that event. I won't go into the physiology of that, but you can find that elsewhere on some of the TRTP training videos. Helen
asks a really good question there. Aren't there usually clusters of overriding negative beliefs? And the answer is yes. And they're often interrelated. And the elegance of TRTP is that usually all of them are dealt with in the process. It's not like they have to come back for months or years dealing with more and more and more of them, because they're all interrelated. We deal with them, and in fact, we give practitioners the tools to be able to identify what they are, what the language is around each of them that frames the client's experience. And so clients come to us and they go through the first session, and and we'll get to this. I can stand up doing I choose statements, and then I will say, just repeat after me, and they repeat it. They go, how do you know me so well? You've only just met me. How are you able to put into words my whole life experience? And I go, well, that's the beauty of this process. So yes, there are. For example, I'm shit. Treat me like shit. It's what I've always got. Keep doing it. I hate it. I don't want it. I'm bad, or I'm not good enough. No matter what I do, it's not good enough. But if only I could be better, mum and dad would stop fighting. If only I was good enough, then my boss wouldn't shout at me. If I was good enough, my kids would stop being such difficult kids, and so on and so on. And of course, it's the negative agency of the 3-year-old, the only agency that they could choose at the time. They kept using it right for the next 40 years or however long. We look at all of those unconscious beliefs and we deal with them together as a negative framework of existing, surviving, because that's all you're doing.
Yep, surviving.
And we dismantle them, and then we do something quite magnificent. We introduce them as an experience to the truth of who they actually are.
Yes, thank you, Richard. And Bruce Lipton, the cell biologist, discovered back in the 70s that our cells have only two switches: shut down survival or thriving and growing. There's nothing else. There's nothing in between. It's one or the other. And it's environmental triggers that cause the shutdown or the thriving. And so we work with that with TRTP. And in terms of how do we know what the unconscious core beliefs are, we get the client to do homework, list the top 10 to 12 most distressing events in your life. We just want, how old were you? What's the name of the event and who was there? We don't want the story. We don't want essays. We don't want to talk about it for weeks. Just give us that. And that gives us a snapshot from which we can get the pattern. And there's only a few patterns across humanity: bullying and abuse, betrayal, abandonment, illness, accident. There's only a few. So we get the pattern, and then we know, oh, these are the absolute unconscious core beliefs that lock in that pattern. So bullying and abuse, it's I don't matter, I'm shit and I deserve to be treated like shit, I deserve to suffer, I deserve to be punished. Unless we change those, even if we take the distress away from the past, that client will go out and create the same again. So we have to change the whole trajectory of their life by changing those unconscious core beliefs. And when we do that, we change our experience of who we are, and we come to know the truth of who we are, because our identity is formed by those unconscious core beliefs that went down when we were little. So it's extraordinarily powerful. And we step people through speaking with the unconscious, because that's where it's all stored. How do we do that? We speak to the unconscious in the language of the unconscious. What is that? The imagination. 2 words, just imagine. And with those 2 words, the critical facility steps aside. We're talking to the unconscious in the language of the unconscious, and the unconscious in the body absolutely believes what we richly imagine. It doesn't know the difference between what we imagine and what's real. It can suck on a piece of lemon, and it's so sour, and there's so much juice, and I'm getting the complete saliva response as if that's actually happening. So we use this facility. So that's session 1. We change the unconscious core beliefs that are negative to the positive, and that will change the whole trajectory of someone's life. We introduce the client to the truth of who they are. And some clients say, how could I have not have known? I believed this whole lie, this whole construct. It wasn't even true. Do you find that?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And even doing the homework, people can actually start to see the patterns themselves. And
Yes.
I've had that oftentimes when they come in for this first session, having filled in the homework, they said, oh my God, I'm starting to see what's happened. I can see a pattern here. And again, all of this is so illuminating for the person that they start to understand themselves, because as we know as therapists, it's so important that we have a sense of who we are and trying to understand ourselves. Because when people have come from traumatic experiences and backgrounds, they don't understand, they don't know, they're just completely lost. And as Richard's saying, there's no agency. But every step enables people to start to get some agency, because they can start to recognise, they can start to see why and how they are the way they are. And that in itself is an empowering part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Like some people,
like they're waking up.
Yeah. Yeah. Waking up. That's it, isn't it? And some people look at their homework and go, it's the same thing again and again. It's just different people.
Yeah.
Richard.
Yeah.
Spiral Dynamics talks about the stages of growth as a human, and I apply this to TRTP, that I call session 1 waking up, and I call session 2 showing up, and I call session 3 growing up, moving on. And I love how it does it so elegantly. I've actually got to argue, it wouldn't matter if you'd never had trauma in your life. Every person on the planet would flourish from session 1. It's that beautiful a process. It is the most life-giving. And I know this is going to sound a little bit ooh-ah, but it's if you want to use the word spiritual, because a client gets to experience their truth and live it. Well, that's what waking up is.
Yeah.
I know who I am. I know who I am. What a wonderful thing to be able to say. How many people actually walk around like zombies their whole lives, never actually knowing who they are?
Yeah. I know who I am and I'm enough.
Yeah.
I'm so much more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm more than enough. Yeah. It's terrific, isn't it? And then we get to the second session. So the point of the second session is to, I talked earlier, and I'll just share screen here, about the unconscious, and trauma gets stored in the unconscious. What happens in a dysregulated system is the hippocampus, responsible for long-term memory, shuts down. When we get that frontal lobe shut down, the system becomes dysregulated. The hippocampus doesn't do its job after a distressing event and put that event in long-term memory and shut the door, and we can move on. Instead, it gets stored in the unconscious like a videotape loop. That event when I was 3, and when I was 9, when I was 15, these little ones when I was 22, 23, this one when I was 35, and the pressure builds up like a balloon, and it gets to the point where it can blow out. And what happens when it blows out? We go into anxiety, depression, PTSD, other mental ill health, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, lupus. Bessel van der Kolk draws the real clear connection between those 3 immuno disorders and trauma. Or we can go into more serious disease. So what we do in session 2 is we turn off the top 3 most distressing events, and all the others just turn off. It's like a 4-legged table. You take up one leg, it all falls over. And the symptoms, whatever the symptoms are, simply disappear. So how do we do that? We use the imagination. We step the person through to an empowered position in regard to what happened, which is Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine say 2 things have to happen. Step the person to an empowered position in regard to what happened, and tell the body it's over. The body has to know it's over. I go further and say the body in the unconscious has to know it's over and I'm safe now.
And it will never happen again.
And it will never happen again. Tell us about your experiences with session 2 and the client's experience of session 2.
Richard? Yeah.
Look, I find session 2 to be so energizing because once a client, it's like getting into a groove. And once a client's in that groove, I watch them change in front of my eyes. And Cassie asked the question, how much traditional therapy, CBT, DBT, EMDR, family systems theory, attachment theory, do you still practice with clients? Well, lots of this is built into TRTP. And I would dare say attachment theory is, and family systems theory is front and center of session 2. But it's not a theory that you cognitively process. It's a theory that becomes a dynamic experience for the client's reality in that moment. And what I watch happen in front of me is the trauma that has been living in their unconscious for their whole lives shift, leave their unconscious, get safely processed. And I want to say that 5 times over if I need to. And I do with clients. I want you to know something. Imagine revisiting your trauma. I made a decision when I trained as a psychotherapist that I would never do trauma therapy. What a joke, because here I am doing trauma therapy all the time.
Yeah.
But the reason I said is because of my own trauma. I didn't want to go to anywhere near it. Who would want to re-traumatize a traumatized person? TRTP doesn't re-traumatize you. It does the exact opposite. It's safe. Otherwise, I would not do it. Kim wouldn't do it. Judith would have realized because of her own trauma that it wouldn't work, because your trauma would run 1,000,000 miles from it. And I did a half-hour introductory session with a client literally before this, and she said, I have so much fear going anywhere near my trauma. And I said, I get it. I need you to know something. I don't take anyone near what is terrifying. I don't take anyone near anything that is overpowering, that's overwhelming. This is safe.
Yeah.
And in the second session, clients walk out of here, out of my room, well,
Yeah.
whole. most of the time. Sometimes a bit of cleanup in session 3, but not much.
Yeah. I know exactly what to do. I'll take you by the hand to the other side of your pain.
Yeah.
Kim.
I have similar experiences, and in many cases, it's over a number of sessions, a number of weeks. For instance, with someone who had serious accidents and illnesses from the age of, well, from a little toddler really, fallen out of his high chair, had broken 30 bones in his body, his ankle 9 times, lots of accidents. And when he came to see me, he'd had a stroke, but he'd had the stroke 10 years prior to seeing me. So, and that had affected his concentration and memory. So we had to go very slowly through the process. And even at the first session, because he was very suicidal, when I did some I choose statements, he felt for the first time he was waking up, and he would go to bed every night telling himself, reciting all of these I chooses for himself, that he was enough and he was safe, and it was okay for him to be a man and to step up and be in the world. He'd been medically retired for about 15, 20 years. So, and of course, that was a very emasculating experience as well for him. So a lot of complex issues there. So we went very slowly. And each time he reported, when he'd come back for the next session, he kept saying, my confidence is growing. He didn't feel he could go out in the world because he couldn't remember people's names. He'd become somewhat agoraphobic. And by the end of that second part of the process, which did take over a few weeks, he was really looking forward to his future. He and the family moved overseas, and he was actually looking forward to making friends. He was looking forward to having conversations and finding out about people. And his whole demeanour had changed. He was so free, so light. And he had cluster headaches, and as many people will know, that led him to feeling suicidal too. The headaches had stopped being serious cluster headaches. He'd have mild headaches occasionally, whereas he'd be having cluster headaches a few times a day. So seeing those sort of changes in a person is just so rewarding. And there's this sense of he'd come into the office and his face would be beaming, and it was just lovely.
Yeah.
So that's certainly very much a standout. And of course, as Richard says too, you can see at the end of that second session for people where it is like I'm free of this. And I remember one client, and she was one of the clients that prompted me to do TRTP. I'd been seeing her for many, many, many years, embarrassingly, because of her complex trauma. And we'd been able to shift everything except the shame. And somehow, whatever we did, we just couldn't shift the shame. I did TRTP, did it one session, shifted the shame, and that was it. And she was able to move on. And she said, Kim, I don't need to see you anymore. She said, because it's time for me to grow up, and I've grown up now and I don't need you. And that was the most heartwarming experience to feel that.
Great stuff. Yes. And in the third session, we create the future, because people who are stuck in trauma have no future concept. Would you like to talk about that? Who'd like to go first? The third session.
Yeah, what we do is we not just show them the future, we get them to experience the future as an invitation, as a gift, based on who they actually are, without any triggers, without any trauma. They get to choose their future. They get to step into it. They get to see it, know it. And I remember my mentor when I trained in it, dear Glenys Falloon, she found this to be the most powerful thing. And it's not uncommon that a client will go, I've never had any thought of a future. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like not to have trauma. It was my normal. It's all I'd ever known. To actually step into my future is such a wonderful thing. And I've had clients in their 70s see and experience a future worth living, where they've got they not just imagine, they experience another 20 years of healthy, vibrant life. And the first question is why did I have to wait till I was 70 to discover, or 75 to discover this? And then it very quickly shifts to, oh no, I'm not going to live with regret. I get to live my future now. I get to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I had a 27-year-old say, where was this when I was young? I go, sorry, Jane, how old are you? I'm 27. I said, oh my God, you're
You
so
poor thing.
old. Yeah. Yeah. Kimmy, do you have anything to say about that third session?
I think it reinforces the idea of hope. And as Richard was saying, certainly many of the people that I've worked with initially, there's no sense of hope. There's only stuck in, this is my traumatic world and traumatic life. And for many times I have people say that I'm their last hope. And if I can't fix them, then they're going to kill themselves. And I have that on a fairly regular basis.
Yep.
Yes, as do I.
Yep, that's a regular thing.
Yeah. So there's no
pressure.
no pressure. But there's no even thinking of future. There's no thinking that there's a future. There's either now, pain, or death. So
dread about just getting through the day.
Oh yes.
How can I do that?
Yeah. And some people not able to get out of bed because of the dread. And I find that in the first session, there's that beginning of hope. They actually start to experience and feel hope. And with the second session, then the hope really is taking hold. So by the third session, they can start to actually see, in fact, hang on, I do have a life now. I can actually see that I've got a future. And some people who haven't worked, like this gentleman I spoke about before, even though he can't work, well, I don't know, maybe in the future, but he could see himself getting out and socializing and being part of his life. And that is just such a fulfilling experience that after a 3-step process, people are able to re-engage with their world. They're able to re-engage with life. Yep. Some people is going back to work. Some people is being out there, exploring, traveling, having a life and thriving.
Yeah. And like David's client, David was the other psychotherapist counsellor who was coming to your supervision group, skiting, you thought, about his great results. Gloating, like that guy with over 100 personalities who by the end of the second session said to the man, the client, hey, Bob, it's over and we're safe now. It's over and you're safe now, so we don't have to do this anymore. And all integrated. It's pretty mind-blowing. Thank you, Kimmy and Richard. Let's look at some of these questions, and this is question time. People ask some questions. Is there a specific process to shift shame, says Z? Kim, it's part of TRTP.
Yes, absolutely. It's all part. We deal with the shame, guilt and shame, self-blame, all in the second part of the process. That's built into it. Because it's so fundamental, because people who've been traumatized carry shame. They carry guilt. And they blame themselves. So this is a very important part of the process.
Yeah, particularly people who've been through childhood abuse, and they detest that younger self.
Yeah.
The thing that's standing out is a client really has to want it, not just say they want it. Yeah, they have to want to be well. And yet, like we say at the beginning, on a scale of 0 to 10, when we're doing assessment of a client, 0 being I don't want to be well, and 10 being I'll walk over broken glass to be well, where are you? And if someone says, oh, I'm about a 6, in inquiring, why are you a 6? Well, I've been going to therapists and psychologists and counsellors for 3 decades, and I dare not get my hopes up because I know they'll be dashed. That's really easy.
So easy.
So easy, darling. It's okay. I can take you by the hand to the other side of your pain. I know where we're going and there's a place better than this. It's so easy to take them from that place. So, yeah, a lot of people are, skeptical. I said the one guy who'd had the most horrific early childhood abuse that I'd ever heard of, next to, second most horrific. And I said, you'll know you're done because by the end of the third session, you'll be able to talk about all this horrific stuff that's happened to you with the same emotional charges, reading out a grocery shopping list from 7 years ago you find in the back of a drawer, rice, coffee, flour. He said, I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine that. So you don't have to, because I know exactly where we're going. And we got to the end of the third session and he said, it's true. It's just boring. My story is just,
One client came to me in the third session and she said, you told me that you would take all the charge out of what happened to me and yet I can still remember being raped. And I said to her, I'm going to ask 3 questions. Firstly, is there any emotional charge when you remember it? She says, oh, no, it just happened to me. I said, secondly, did that memory come to you or did you have to go looking for it? She said, oh, no. I had to go looking for it. She thought, I wonder, can I still remember it? Oh, I can still remember it. Oh, I thought it would be gone. I said, no, I can't take your memories out. I just take all the charge, all the emotional content. It didn't affect her at all. I said, thirdly, do you notice when you're walking around, moving around life, are you hypervigilant around men as she always was? Could you walk down the street without getting heart palpitations? She says, oh, no, walk everywhere. No problems at all. Well, there's no trauma.
Yeah, hypervigilance gone, symptoms gone.
Yep.
Isn't it terrific? And we get so energized from this work.
Success rate is roughly for me now tipping up around 95%. I used to say 90, 91. I'm now, the evidence suggests 95%.
Yeah.
Very unusual that a client doesn't get well. And I can always tell a client what's going on, why
they haven't got well.
Yeah.
It's always pretty apparent. Kim, have you found that?
Yes, absolutely. So at the end of that second part of the process, and we go back and we just check in, as Richard was saying, you recall that event, how distressed are you? If they say, oh, not really, or can't remember, or nothing, then sure.
Yep,
it's cleared. But if they're saying, oh, well, I can still remember, or no, I can get a little bit upset by it. So we talk it through and then they can go, oh, right, I know what I've done.
Yeah. Yep. And now let's just redo it. Let's just tweak it and bring down that distress level to I think that's the technical term.
Yeah, and we do it straight away.
Do it straight away. Yeah. And we did an audit a couple of years ago over 715 clients with an external statistician, Doctor of Clinical Psychology at one of the Sydney universities who we'd never met. And the results were on the DASS, Depression, Anxiety, Stress score, which goes from normal to moderate to extreme to severely extreme. And he found that 89% of people with severely extreme anxiety went to no anxiety, 92% of extremely severe depression went to none, and 96% of extremely severe stress went to none. That was across 715 clients and about 30 practitioners. So that's the success rate.
And I'd like to add, I couldn't do this work if I wasn't successful. I can't get up each day and do a job and be failing at it. Therapy is not the sort of job you can do and not have success.
Not once you get into your 60s, and I'm 63, about to turn 64. My brother-in-law is now retired psychiatrist, and he told me he's in his early 70s, and he told me 10 years ago he wouldn't take on any complex trauma clients because he knew it would take 15 years to get them well, and he didn't have 15 years of practice left in his work, so he'd stopped doing complex trauma. And I realized at that point I was reaching, the point where I didn't want to work with a client with complex trauma for 15 years. Please no. The powerlessness that I was actually nearing retirement 4 years ago, and here I am still working because I'm having fun, because clients get well, and it is the greatest satisfaction apart from the compassion that we have for our clients. We want them to be well. All of us do. All of us do. To know that we can get them there is the most rewarding thing. Of course, then you have the referral, and the income that generates. And so I'm booked up for the rest of this year. And I know you're the same, Kim. And so I said, I said to Judith, "Oh dear, I'll run out of clients if they all get well." Well, that was the dumbest thing I think I've ever said in my life.
Because it's so obvious, the result's so obvious that people come and say, "I want what he's having." Yeah.
Yep.
And Z has said, "Thanks, Z. I just wanted to say that I finished my 3 sessions of TRTP with Helena McCallum, who's a psychologist, a TRTP practitioner, last week, and my grief, depression, and charge around abusive family is all gone." Yay! Go you, Z. High five. That's fabulous. Cassie is terrific. My husband just completed TRTP a few weeks ago, and it has absolutely fundamentally changed his life. That's fabulous.
Wonderful. We have a mentor in the work, Tanya Comerford, who has written a book. I got a new husband in 7 days. Her husband came to see me, almost suicidally depressed. And of course, he left my room in the space of 2 weeks completely well. And she's written a book about it. And she's up on in Hervey Bay in Queensland, and she's doing incredible work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's written a book.
Yes, I got a new husband in 7 days. Yeah. Sounds too good to be true. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it does sound too good to be true. Yep. It's a bit of a long one to go into. We've only got a few minutes left. B. Yes, body aches and symptoms. Yes, the body is totally involved in trauma. And of course, there's lots of stuff in the body, living through Vietnam War as a child. Yep. Sorry, B, we don't have time to go in depth into that. I have huge resistance to being
able to visualize or imagine. I usually find that that's often because of trauma. And so I say to a client, I just get them to say, "I choose to know. It's safe for me to imagine, richly imagine." Oh, because all of my life is hidden there, and I choose to know it's safe for me. And once a client shifts there, they find their capacity to imagine, not necessarily visualize, but anticipate what's going to happen, shifts, and they can. Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah. So we say that we don't use visualization in TRTP.
No.
We say to the client, as I said earlier, the richer you make your internal experience, the more profound will be your outcome. Some people get a sense of, you're on the beach, you get a sense of the early morning sun on your back. You don't have to see it. So a master of TRTP can easily assist somebody to shift that B. So, it does sound too good to be true, and you can stay with that if you'd like to. Thank you so much, admin to host. Okay, I'm feeling optimistic for the first time, 50 plus years.
Wow.
How do I find a practitioner in Melbourne? Well, admin, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. It's admin here. You can find any practitioner. The TRTP is just as effective online, as it is to face-to-face. And you can go to the website. I will just bring it up here and share screen so you can see what I'm doing. You go to trtptherapy.com.
And while she's doing that, I just want to say there's a beautiful community, and of course, of TRTP therapists that we're a part of, and you get continuing, ongoing support the whole way through the process. And you can find practitioners on the website, and you can find training there. And so we get referral work through the website.
Yep.
Just because we're registered.
Yep. And so you go to, I'm looking for a practitioner, find a practitioner. Generally, the people at the top of the page that have mentor under their name are the most experienced. And then, there's Kim, there's Richard. They're the most experienced. So I always recommend those mentors who are part of the teaching team. The other thing is, how long is the training, Jane, and how long does it take to become competent? Yes, Cassie says, my husband did it from Arizona, USA over Zoom. How long is the training? It's a 10-week program. It's very comprehensive. It can all be done online. It's mainly live online. At the end of that 10 weeks, it's not bye, see you later. It's you go into the TRTP practitioner community, and there's continual support and there's continual professional development. There's a Zoom call once a week where you bring your questions, and there's continual training. There's masterclasses. There's a community online where you can go to the forum and put in a tricky case, and people will come and assist you with that. The community is one of kindness, generosity, and egos left at the door, and anyone who doesn't fit that ethos, we actually show them the door. We guard that community to make sure it's a safe place. So what we'll do, because there are a few people, yes, admin, you can do face-to-face. If you go to the practitioner community, you can find people in Melbourne. Just there's ways that you can do that on there. There's a few people asking about the training. What we'll do, how long does it take to become competent? Well, Jane, some people like Kim and Richard become masters very quickly. And some people paint by numbers for quite some time. It's an art. So it just depends on who you are and where you're at, and what energy you put into it. Because like anything, you put energy in, you practice, you think about it, you take it apart. But the support is then the next training begins. One started today, but the next one starts in September. You can find the details on the website, trtptherapy.com. And what we'll do, because there are a number of people asking about training, is at the end of this webinar, just put in interested. If you're interested, just put in interested. If you're interested in the training, just type it in and we'll send you information, and we'll send you a link where you can actually make a calendar appointment, so we don't play phone tag, and Lisa or someone from the office will connect with you and answer any questions you have and take you through and see if we're a match for you, if you're a match for us, and we can just take it from there. No pressure. So put in, oh, Anthea, you're enrolled for September. Look forward to meeting you. Richard's going to be mentoring in September. Kim will be available for clients in September, I think. Can we get a copy of this recording, please? Yes, you can. Cannot wait. Great. And yeah, so put in interested if you're interested, and we'll send out an email with a link where you can just click on and make a calendar appointment to talk with us, because the world's in trouble and we need processes that actually work. Judy Tobin, I see you got your hand up, but there's nothing I can do. We're out of time. Thank you, everybody. And Kim Hopson, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and your experience. And Richard, always great to be with you, with your enthusiasm and energy. It has been a great webinar. Thank you so much for your generosity and just giving up your time and coming and have a conversation. Let's have another one soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for investing your time, your energy, and let's make the place a better world just because we can. Thank you.